Dear friends and colleagues, dear excellencies, a very good morning to you all from Berlin. Welcome at the virtual high-level think tank event on the future of the European Union's Eastern Partnership, which is jointly organized by the EU Commission's DGAP and the German Council on Foreign Relations. It's part of the think tank network on the Eastern Partnership, and it will be my privilege to be moderator at this first session. My name is Milan Nič. I am Senior Fellow at the German Council on Foreign Relations, DGAP. This will be a breakfast spotlight session on Belarus, entitled Democratic Future of Belarus in the Eastern Partnership, which will run until 9:45. We will have first the welcome remarks from Katarina Maternova from DGAP. I will introduce her later. This will be followed by keynote remarks by Svitlana Tsikhanovskaya, leader of the Belarus opposition in exile, followed by a chat with Pavel Atushko from the Presidium of the Coordination Council of Belarus. And at the end, we will hear concluding remarks from Lawrence Meredith from DGAP. You can use Slido for posting questions. And this is also broadcasted at the YouTube channel of DGAP. Without further ado, let's start with the welcoming words by Katarina Maternova, who is Deputy Director-General at the EU Commission's DGAP, in charge of the Eastern Neighborhood Economic Investment Plans, and she's also the acting head of the support group for Ukraine. Katarina, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Milan, and thanks to you and Stefan Meister and DGAP for organizing this event. I think it's important to bring not only political representatives, which will be happening next week around this Eastern Partnership Summit, but also the broader think tank community. And I'm delighted that you chose to devote a special session right at the outset to Belarus, because I think Belarus has been on our minds for over a year, very, very intensely. And I'm delighted that we are having a session now that brings people, hopefully also in the audience, people that really want the same thing, which is a prosperous and democratic Belarus. The falsification of the 2020 presidential elections, of course, followed by the quite awesomely brutal repression by the Lukashenko regime, has cast a dark shadow over the continent. And the EU has really been uniquely united and steadfast in its response. And it's really a great, great honor to have Svitlana Tsikhanovskaya give a keynote speech for the panel, and then also have Pavel Atushka to participate in the panel, because it's really the opposition together with the people of Belarus that are hopefully be in a position to bring a fundamental change to the country. What the EU has done is respond around sort of three axes, if I may say so. It's sanctions, support, and solidarity. In fact, on the sanctions, we have now rolled out a fifth package of sanctions that are now targeting, I believe, over 180 individuals and over 25 entities. And at the same time, we have recalibrating our assistance package completely away from the government interlocutors and in support, which is the second axis, which is support to the victims of violence, the independent media, the civil society organizations, including the opposition, and also to the small and medium-sized enterprises. This year we were able to mobilize upwards of 30 million of euros assistance, and we are now in the process of approving a second package that will be unveiled later for next year. On the solidarity side, as you probably all know, we have prepared a 3 billion support package to Belarus, to democratic Belarus, to restart the economy, to support comprehensive creation of jobs, democratizing the country's institutions, stabilizing the economy. But this package of measures is, of course, contingent on having a democratic Belarus, which we are all rooting for and hoping for. Unfortunately, in the meantime, the Belarus regime has been going in the opposite direction, including the hybrid warfare on the Belarus, Polish, and Baltic state borders, with the using of poor migrants as a hybrid weapon. So that has obviously very much increased the tensions with the EU. We have launched a number of diplomatic efforts with the countries of origins that are now showing some results. And we are also working with the Organization for Migration, IOM, and scaling up our support to voluntary returns. Now, turning to the Eastern Partnership, we have not been officially notified, just picked up from press the intention of the regime to suspend Belarus membership in the Eastern Partnership. But since we don't recognize Mr. Lukashenko as a legitimate leader, we also don't recognize the desire to take Belarus out of Eastern Partnership. Belarus will be present in the Eastern Partnership with an empty chair. And there are going to be, in addition to this event, this spotlight event ahead of the main panel, there will be also an event organized by President Michel and hosted by HRVP on Sunday that will be welcoming the Belarusian opposition leaders in town. And this is just to highlight that we think that Eastern Partnership is for the Belarus people, and therefore we don't really recognize the idea that Belarus and its people should be taken out of Eastern Partnership, because we see Belarus people as Belarusians as part and parcel of this inclusive format. So. The last point I would like to make is that we've been in discussions with Svetlana and her colleagues, and we hope to now in March organize an international donor conference to support the civil society and the media and the opposition leaders in Belarus, so they'll be able to continue that very much worthwhile fight. And it is now my great honor to listen to Svetlana, and Milan, over to you.
Thank you, Katarina. So, Madam Tsikhanouskaya, please take the floor. Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya is leading figure of Belarusian democratic opposition and a former presidential candidate in Belarus in the summer of 2020. Madam Tsikhanouskaya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Milan. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Katarina, for your kind introduction. During last year and till now, I feel your solidarity and personal involvement in our struggle for freedom. I would also like to thank the German Council on Foreign Relations and DGAP for organizing this timely discussion. Since spring, I have met many European politicians, experts, and journalists. And every place, at every event, I emphasized how important Eastern Partnership is for Belarusians. And I used every possibility to emphasize how important the upcoming summit is. And I'm glad to see that the summit is taking place for the first time in 4 years, and it's a timely event not only for Belarus but and other participating countries, but for European Union too. The Eastern Partnership has become one of those markers that draw a distinct line between the regime's view of the world and how Belarusians see their future. In June, the regime declared that it suspended the participation of Belarus in Eastern Partnership initiative. And Belarusian response to this was Lukashenko leaves, Belarus stays. In the first place, he doesn't have the mandate from Belarusians to make decisions contradicting national interests. But also Lukashenko has been the worst student in the Eastern Partnership class, keeping Belarus behind. And on the contrary, Belarusians clearly see the potential of the program. We need to preserve and develop Belarus participation as the only mechanism connecting Belarus with the European Union. Belarus participation in the partnership should be used to prepare for the transitional stage. It should be used to implement reforms when democratic change comes. At this stage, we need the full engagement of democratic leaders and civil society representatives to bring practical benefits to Belarusian society. And while the EU has frozen the programs with the regime, we do not have to waste precious time. Instead, we can use this potential and instruments of the Eastern Partnership to prepare for the transformation in Belarus. Broadly, this requires political and civic actors responsible for various reforms, knowledge and solution ready for implementation, and trained professionals to carry out reforms. And finally, readiness of public opinion to support these reforms. And to meet these needs, it's necessary to focus on 4 key activities. First, we want to develop solutions for specific areas by forming model institutions for the future. For example, broad education reform can be based on the experience of advanced educational pilot projects that can be replicated to the entire educational system. It's possible to develop a model kindergarten or secondary school, for example, and it would include educational materials and environment management and teacher training systems. Such models can be implemented in various areas, from the rule of law to the digital economy, from climate adaptation to tax reforms, for example. Second, we need specialists who will implement these reforms. Education and professional training can be carried out through a system of tailored programs and fellowships for managers in various areas: public administration, business, green economy, education, foreign affairs, etc. Third, reforms should have owners in the form of coalitions of public actors. The support program for civil society should help coalition building of those who want to define reforms and policies. In a short-term perspective, given the repressions, support for the Belarusian civil society needs flexibility and prompt decision-making. And finally, a media program is needed to inform, educate, and offer space for the exchange of opinions of Belarusians on the vision for a new Belarusian reforms. The program can support any groups, from bloggers and individual journalists to traditional media, covering specific subjects: democratic governance, entrepreneurship, digital transformation, and so on. And in conclusion, I would like to go forward to the summit on December 15. It's my hope that Belarus will feature prominently in the agenda and discussions. And I call on the EU member states and participating countries to reflect the position of the Belarusian people in the final declaration. And they are: Belarus must retain its place in the Eastern Partnership. The suspension of Belarus participation in the program by the illegitimate Lukashenko's regime is flatly rejected by the Belarusian people, the EU and its member states, and the other European Eastern Partnership participating states. Cooperation with Belarus will continue in the Eastern Partnership framework through the Belarusian democratic leadership and civil society. The non-state actors will keep maximum access to the tools and capabilities of the Eastern Partnership. Next, the European Union will proceed with implementing the flagship projects as long as they advance and facilitate a democratic transition. Civil society actors, including those based abroad, will be directly engaged in the implementation of these projects. The European Union will maintain the achieved level of agreements on simplifying visa regime for Belarusian citizens. The EU will keep open the opportunities for civil society participation through the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum and the Belarusian National Platform. The EU will develop programs to support independent media, civil society organizations, education initiatives, and private business. The European Union will invite Belarusian democratic leaders, representatives of CSOs, and experts as equal partners by the EU institutions and officials in developing EU policy towards Belarus. And finally, the fundamental conditions for restarting the dialogue with the official Belarusian authorities within the Eastern Partnership framework are as follows: release all political prisoners, stop violence and repressions, provide a safe return of Belarusian democratic leaders to Belarus from abroad, and conduct free and fair elections under international observation. So thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen, and my best wishes to you all, and to have a productive summit in the interest of our nations.
Thank you, Madam Tsikhanouskaya. Before you leave, I know that you are now at the visit in one of the EU member states. You have to go with your program, but can you tell us where you are and what is your program today, and also when is your trip to Brussels?
At the moment, I'm in Poland. I'm going to meet with President Duda and Speaker of the Sejm, Madame Witek. Also, I'm meeting with different organizations, Belarusian organizations here, and I'm going on Sunday to Brussels.
Thank you. We wish you best of luck for the next days and months. We will discuss situation in Belarus with Pavel Latushka, but before I introduce him and his colleague Vladimir Ostapenko, let me remind everybody that there is a Slido link at the chat that you can use for posing questions on Belarus, because until 9:45 we are discussing situation in Belarus and the future of Belarus within the Eastern Partnership. Thereafter, after a virtual coffee break, we will have a main panel starting at 10 o'clock on the future of the Eastern Partnership in the context of the upcoming summit. But now we concentrate on Belarus, and we will have a chat with Pavel Latushka, member of the Presidium of the Coordination Council of Belarus and head of the Anti-Crisis Management. Pavel Latushka is a former Minister of Culture in Belarus, I believe the youngest minister in Belarus before, and also former ambassador. And with him is Vladimir Ostapenko, who is also a former Belarusian diplomat and former ambassador to Argentina until last summer, and to Cuba before that. Both of you are lawyers, and you can also tell us, maybe you start with you, Pavel Latushka, you can tell us what is the role of the Coordination Council of Democratic Belarus.
Thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you, Ms. Katerina Maternova, for that opportunity, for all of you, that opportunity to present our views to the distinguished participants of the Forum Future of the European Union's Eastern Partnership. I think we all have to admit that the effectiveness of the Eastern Partnership for Belarus has been due to a constant search for compromises between the regime of Belarus and the European Union. At the same time, such compromises were rather aimed at turning a blind eye to the repression of the Lukashenko regime in order to achieve the geopolitical task, the involvement of Belarus in the pan-European cooperation. In fact, all this turned out to be an illusory process, and may my listeners forgive me a self-deception. Lukashenko's obsessive desire to preserve his power by any means has always been and today has become an absolute obstacle to Belarus participants in the European Partnership project. To understand the further ways of cooperation, it is also necessary to accept the fact that the scenarios for 5-10 years ago, when after another rigged election, Lukashenko came back to the field of dialogue with the Europeans, can be repeated. It means no way back to Lukashenko. The scale of repression, the number of crimes committed, and the hybrid war with the European Union are factors cannot be overcome anymore. Therefore, today, the European partnership should rather serve as maximum support for Belarusian society in its democratic aspirations, in retaining the right of Belarusians to decide their own fate. This approach will lead in the long run to a change in the situation and the restoration of the legitimacy of power in Belarus. But to achieve this, the European strategy towards Belarus is needed to resolve the regional crisis created by the Lukashenko regime. Maybe later I will tell, if it will be interesting, several words about the strategy, what we propose, but I also try to answer your question about the situation in democratic opposition, about the role of the Coordination Council. We have to state today there are political institution of the Belarusian democratic forces which emerged after the events of August 9 last year and have already been recognized by the European Parliament, and which continue the fight against the regime in order to restore the legitimate rights and freedoms for Belarusian citizens. The one among political institutions representing today is the National Crisis Management, which I chair. It supports an active agenda of international pressure, economic pressure, legal pressure, and international pressure. The Coordination Council, of which I am a member of the Presidium, emerged as a structure after the events of August 2020 and is now under tremendous repression. Of the 7 members of the Coordination Council Presidium, they are in prison, and 4 are in political exile. Many core members are also imprisoned or have been forced to go abroad. Now in Belarus, the Coordination Council cannot maintain activities due to the threats of repression against the remaining Coordination Council members. At the same time, the question of the reorganization of the Coordination Council as a body that should play a key role in the transitory period of the change of power in Belarus is relevant. The issue of expanding the competences of the Presidium of the Coordination Council and the giving it the function of strategic decision-making is now being discussed. One cannot ignore the important component of the democratic forces in Belarus, the civic initiatives, without whose support and intellectual input and organizational resources it is impossible to present a picture of a democratic society. As an example, we are together with the Coordination Council in cooperation with such initiatives as Honest People, Golos and Zuber made a joint decision to oppose Lukashenko's plan to organize a referendum on changing the constitution of Belarus in February next year. In fact, there are initiatives in all areas of civil society, sports, medicine, culture, education, mass media, students, and many artists. Unfortunately, taking into account the repression that the regime has been carrying out for decades, the political parties, the old, so-called old political parties, which still formally exist in Belarus, are practically incapable of functioning. Most of them have already been liquidated. It's in several words about the situation in the democratic forces in Belarus. Thank you.
Mr. Latushka, if we can do a little chat here before we open up to questions on Slido. Oh, how satisfied you are with the European Union's response to repression of society in Belarus so far, and what do you expect from the upcoming Eastern Partnership Summit?
First of all, we're expecting, as I said, the adoption of the strategy about on the situation what we have now in Belarus, and our appeals for the all European structures is to adopt such strategy. It seems to me it is a very important point in agenda, and the first point of this strategy is the recognition of Lukashenko and his government. We know that your position about the last falsified elections in Belarus, but it is no voice of the independent states, members of the European Union, about the derecognition in the lower sphere, the regime of Lukashenko as a president and Lukashenko's government. So it's first very important point in our strategy. We are waiting to be adopted by the European Union structures. I'd like to mention that on the resolution of European Parliament decision of 7th of October says that continues to stand firmly in solidarity with the people of Belarus as well as with the peaceful protesters who continue to stand up for a free and democratic Belarus, recalls that the European Union and its member states did not recognize the results of the 2020 presidential election due to massive falsification and fabrication, and do not recognize Alexander Lukashenko as a president of Belarus. But it is a resolution of the European Parliament. We are waiting the same decision of the member states. Secondly, the recognition of Lukashenko and his associates as international criminals, political prisoners, torture, murder, all these are crimes against humanity. Engaging in terrorist activities, including hijacking a plane, creating a migration crisis, nuclear waste, and the return of nuclear weapons. In the above situation, there is need for a coalition of European states that will have the political will, it's very important to stress, political will to prosecute these crimes, including through national system and international justice of the International Criminal Court. The initiation of prosecution is a fact of justice and inevitability of punishment. And the third point, strong or no economic sanctions. What matters here is not only the fact of the adoption, but also the fact of control of the application. So is the instrument of accountability for political repression. So three main points in the strategy, and of course we are waiting of regular context, regular events, conference which can be organized every year between European Union member states as a whole and with the democratic forces of Belarus. Maybe my colleague Ambassador Starpenko will add some words. Thank you.
Yes, let's go to Vladimir Stepenka. And meanwhile, I will ask your staff, Pavel Latushka, to put your microphone a little bit closer to your, yes.
Okay.
I think, yeah, there was too much echo. So, Vladimir Stepenka, very concrete question, sorry.
The view expressed by Pavel, thank you. And once again, my pleasure to join this very noble and interesting discussion.
So we have to move on with another question. Do you think that the crisis at the Belarusian border with the asylum seekers from the Middle East is over?
If it is a question for me, I'll try to be brief in answering that. We know that it's a man-made crisis, artificial crisis created by Lukashenko, using illegal migrants as the as an instrument to exert pressure on the border of the European Union. That was all predicted by the National Anti-Crisis Management starting from June, July. And of course, now we can state that the reaction of the European Union was strong, but rather late. For the moment, it looks a little bit controlled, let's say, but still on the border we have around 1,000 migrants. And there are figures saying that in the country, in Belarus, there are about 5,000–6,000 migrants. And Lukashenko still promises to build up pressure by spring. So in order to resolve this crisis, we need to see how we can resolve the main origin of it. And the main origin of it is an illegitimate president who holds the power in the country, who violates all kinds of laws that you may think about. Thank you.
And last question before I read some other questions from Slido. So last question from me. What we heard from Pavel Latushka about the upcoming national referendum on the new constitution of Belarus, if I understood you well, you are saying that you are not recognizing the whole process, and your message to people who stayed in Belarus, who are under daily pressure, repression, is exactly what? To ignore the referendum, to go out to the street because they will face imprisonment immediately. Now, what is it? What do you expect from people who follow you in Belarus?
Thank you so much. First of all, it is not a national referendum, and it is not a referendum in what Lukashenko planned to organize. Of course, it will be the day of so-called voting on so-called referendum. It is a problem that the draft constitution has not yet been published. Date for this unknown, probably 27 February 2022. The referendum is called by a legitimate president. It's very important to mention it again. So it has no legal consequences from the beginning. There are thousands of political prisoners in the country. There is no free media. Election observers have already been detained and searched en masse. There are no human rights organizations. It is no human rights in Belarus. So how can a popular plebiscite be held under such conditions? It is impossible. After all, actually holding a referendum in this form is a crime according to the legislation of Belarus. A referendum is considered by the citizens of Belarus as an anti-people, anti-constitution, a legitimate act of an illegitimate ruler, the results of which will not have any legally relevant consequences and will be cancelled when a democratic government comes to power. Under such conditions, the day of referendum at the same time an opportunity for the Belarusian people and for the democratic forces of Belarus to demonstrate our will, to demonstrate our protest. That is why we have already suggested that Belarusians come to the polling stations and cast invalid ballots. The regime is already reacting to our active agenda with threats and detentions. Nevertheless, about 70% of Belarusians plan to go to the referendum in accordance with the researchers' pools what we have. That is why we ask our international partners not to evaluate the referendum process itself. We ask them to form a political position on the non-recognition of the referendum before it is held and to express it well in advance. For example, after the dictator has announced the date of the referendum. We believe that only one election campaign is possible in Belarus, an election of a new president according to international legal standards without Lukashenko's participation, after the release of all political prisoners. What will happen after the referendum is also a very important question. We are actively involved in discussion among the democratic forces to reorganize the Coordination Council, to give it more weight and strategic decision-making, and are discussing a post-referendum action plans that cannot yet be made public. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Mr. Latushka, thank you. Now I will read you 3 questions from the Slido, and together with Mr. Ostapenko, I plea for very short answers. So first, from Vera Ryachkova from the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, the European Union adopted recently the 5th set of sanctions against the Lukashenko regime and his representatives, together with other allied countries. What is your assessment of the impact of these measures so far, and how should the European Union continue applying those measures? Mr. Ostapenko?
Well, we still believe that the sanctions could have been stronger, could have been more effective, could have been more impactful. Although it's a good decision that the 5th package was adopted. So we know that the work is going on the 6th package, but we believe that the level of repressions and the level of human rights violations is much higher than the reaction from the European Union. We believe that with the strong sanctions, we will enforce the regime of Lukashenko to come to dialogue with the civil society and to be forced to find the political solution of the crisis. Thank you.
Can I add several words? I want to tell you again, but only the strategy of 3 points can provide us to the positive results, what we are waiting, what people of Belarus are waiting. Strategy is the recognition. The second point is recognition of him and his compliance as a criminal, and the third is the sanctions.
Next question is from Andrei Pavlovich. At the moment, Belarusian young people have serious obstacles for participating at the EU's Erasmus and European Solidarity Corps programs. Does DGNIR plan to launch a special support mechanism to solve this problem? We can leave this question, Lorenz, for you when you will conclude in a few minutes. Other question, what are channels through which the Eastern Partnership funds can actually reach those targeted, that is, Belarusian civil society and grassroots initiatives inside Belarus, given the country's regime?
Shall I try to answer that question? It's a very difficult question, as you may imagine, because the regime is very tough on controlling the borders, with the exception of migrants, because Belarusians cannot leave the country. The money cannot enter the country freely. All the money are traced, and then you are charged with the, extremist activity. So we need to find new, unprecedented ways to work with the funds. There are different scenarios using the cryptocurrencies, using different other schemes, which I'm not going into details. And of course, we believe that the special emphasis should be made to the thousands of Belarusians that already forced to leave the country, that are already staying in neighboring countries, Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine, that could be the beneficiaries of the educational and other programs with the Eastern Partnership.
I would like to support my colleague, Ambassador Ostapenko. First of all, you should understand that Lukashenko liquidates more than, or approximately 400 NGOs in Belarus. So civil society not exists now in Belarus, in our country. It was mentioned by our ex-colleague, Minister Mackay. He said several months ago that he will and government will liquidate all their NGOs, and the story is that we have no more. So I will tell you that it's very important to create the educational centers in the universities near the Belarus, in the Latvia, in Lithuania, in Poland, in Ukraine. I absolutely agree with Ambassador Ostapenko. Thank you.
Last question from me before we go to Lorenz Manet for concluding remarks. This broadcast is followed also by your former colleagues, diplomats from Belarus and people from the government. What is your short message to them? 30 seconds, please, Mr. Ostapenko.
Well, we made a number of messages to the civil servants of Belarus, trying to fight for them, trying to reserve their place in the future Belarus. We believe that civil servants will be needed for the new Belarus, but for this, they do not need to betray the interests of the people right now, because what they are doing is the participation in the crimes of the illegal holding the power. That's my short message. Thanks.
Latuška?
Stop, wait. It is not today, it was before they to decide. So my appeal for my colleagues to understand that there is no perspectives with such regime, with dictatorship in Belarus. It is the life of everybody and it's decision of everybody what he will do in the future. We decide. I am still motivated and I will continue my struggle. And my appeal for my colleagues to assist, to communicate, to help us to the future of independence of Belarus. Because today is not a question only the human rights. It's a question also of perspective of our independence, of our sovereignty.
Thank you very much. That was Pavel Latuška, a member of the Presidium of the Coordination Council of Belarus, and Vladimir Ostapenko, his colleague from the Anti-Crisis Management. And now we will go for concluding remarks to Lawrence Meredith, Director for Neighborhood East and Institutional Building at the European Commission's DGAP.
Thank you very much, Milan, and it's a great pleasure to join you all online. First of all, let me start on behalf of the European Union by thanking Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, Pavel Latuška, and Vladimir Ostapenko for setting out so clearly the position of the democratic forces of Belarus. And I think we can all join in underlining our admiration for their courage and commitment in driving forward the forces for freedom in Belarus on behalf of all the Belarusian people. And indeed, I think as the call has come from all three of them, this must and will be a key theme for the Eastern Partnership Summit, which will take place next week. I think it's very important and very symbolic that there is an empty chair for the people of Belarus at that Eastern Partnership Summit, because quite clearly the European Union does not recognize the illegitimate regime of Lukashenko, and therefore we want to see the democratic forces of Belarus continue in the Eastern Partnership. We will continue our support. I think you've heard a strong and united call from the opposition forces for more European Union for the people of Belarus. And in response to the call for a strategy, I would like to underline that I think Ms. Maternova has set out that there is a clear strategy, and we expect that to be confirmed by the leaders next week. And I'd like to once again reiterate the three key points as the European Union see it. Number one, sanctions, and all the opposition forces call clearly for resolute opposition to Lukashenko regime, which is not legitimate. The elections were fraudulent last year. Number two, continuing and strong support from the European Union. And there were questions to me on how can we continue that. I think we do have strong channels. Of course, it's difficult in the extraordinary circumstances, but we work through through the democratic forces represented in this panel today, but also with dedicated bodies such as the European Endowment for Democracy, the Prague Civic Center, and numerous other organizations committed to providing support to the democratic forces. We've come out with a strong package of over 30 million euros, which we are implementing. There was a specific question on Erasmus I shall come back to. And the third pillar is solidarity with the people of Belarus. And that's why we start this very important think tank event with a Belarus spotlight event. There will be a dedicated Belarus gathering of the democratic forces on Sunday as a prelude to the summit, and to underline how important our support for the democratic forces is. And we've heard calls from all three that we need to and we will continue to reach out to bring these practical and tangible benefits to the Belarusian people, because it's very important that the European Union continues to extend the hand of solidarity to the Belarusian people. We're working also to deliver vaccines, which are much needed for the people in this COVID crisis, but I'd like to reiterate the calls also for continuing support to independent media, to civil society, to private business, and what, as Ms. Tsikhanouskaya said, education, fellowships, and ensuring that there's real ownership of reforms are priorities. And we look forward and hope that there can be free and fair elections under international observation, and that the democratic forces of Belarus will prevail. On the last point of Erasmus, I would just say that we, of course, have stopped the capacity building. We don't recognize the regime, but we continue the mobility, and we have a dedicated program to support Belarusian youth, and youth are at the heart of this democratic movement, and we continue to reach out to them. So with that, Milan, back to you. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Lawrence Meredith. Before I invite everybody, all participants or people who follow us for a virtual coffee break, let me first of all apologize that we went slightly over time. I did not manage to read out all questions on Slido to you, but we can package it and share it with you, Pavel Latushka, Vladimir Stepenka later, and with the Commission. And what happens now is, after the coffee break at 10 o'clock, there will be a main panel on the future of the Eastern Partnership. So don't go away, don't leave this webinar. You can just switch off your camera, and I will hand over to the moderator of the next panel, my dear colleague Stefan Meister. And I believe your speakers are already with us, and those are Michael Siebert from the European External Action Service, Managing Director for Russia and Eastern Partnership. Let me briefly introduce also others. Katarina Maternova, you already know. I see Vano Chikwadze from Georgia, EU Integration Program Manager at the Open Society Georgia Foundation. And we are still waiting for Kristina Gerasimov, the head of presidential administration in Moldova. She will join us shortly. But now let's enjoy the virtual coffee break. See you at 10 o'clock.
Hi, Stefan.
Hi. Sorry, I had some technical problems. I just had an internet phase out and I need to change the laptop, and I'm now with a different system. So I'm very sorry. And I think I now have a different camera. That's also the problem. So I might try to shift, but can you see and hear me well? Because then I would start.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
great.
think it's good enough, Stefan. Better
Yeah.
to be safe than sorry, and continue.
Yeah, so very sorry for these technical problems. It happened exactly at the moment when we left. I want to welcome you to this high-level panel on the future of Eastern Partnership in the context of the Eastern Partnership, of the upcoming Eastern Partnership Summit. This is a jointly organized event by DGAP and the German Council on Foreign Relations. My name is Stefan Meister. I'm head of the Program for International Order and Democracy at the German Council on Foreign Relations. I'm and my team also responsible for the think tank network in which environment this event is taking place. Just give me a couple of words to frame the setting for this event. After 3 years without a summit and ahead of the official Eastern Partnership Summit on December the 15th, the region faces several challenges, including on the border of Belarus, Ukraine and Russian border, the Second Karabakh War, and also on energy security. At the same time, with Moldova, we see a success story in terms of a pro-reform government, and the EU is engaging much in the domestic crisis in Georgia and greatly supports also Ukraine in its reform process. The conceptual basis for the summit is the joint staff working document published by the European Commission and the High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy in July this year, 2021. The paper is the result of a long-term consultation process between the Eastern Partnership countries and the EU member states. It is one of the most ambitious, comprehensive, and detailed strategies of the EU on the Eastern Partnership region and a good basis for the next years. Together with the Green Deal and the Green Transformation Policy of the EU, it will guide the countries on economic, social and governance reforms. So I think it's really a very ambitious also a program or guiding line we see. In this framework, with the support of the Commission, and DGAP particularly, the German Council on Foreign Relations has created an Eastern Partnership think tank network more than 1 year ago. Think tankers from Eastern Partnership countries and Europe discuss trends in the Eastern Partnership region and policy recommendations for the further development of the Eastern Partnership and the countries in areas like rule of law, green transition, but also a different variety of reform areas. This is about to bring the Eastern Partnership countries closer to the EU and to increase networking between experts and think tankers in the Eastern Partnership countries and Europe. We organize national consultations with each partner country, networking events, and high-level public events like today. This event is particularly important because it is close to the summit, and we have prepared recommendations in areas like rule of law and green transition, which you can find on the project page. We will have now 4 panelists. Unfortunately, Anna Westerholm, the Swedish Eastern Partnership ambassador, had to refuse in the last moment to join. So we have more time for the other 4 speakers, also for the discussion, also for your questions. And after 2 rounds of panel discussion, we will open a Q&A session and we'll have 2 interventions also from our Eastern Partnership think tank network. You can ask questions not in the chat, but via Slido. So you can find in the chat also the link, and you can see here the link. So you can scan the code now for going on this page. Or you just go on the Slido.com webpage, Future of Eastern Partnership, and you can ask questions there. So I want to introduce you shortly this great panel. I'm very honored to moderate this panel. We will have first Michael Siebert, who is Managing Director for Russia, Eastern Partnership, Central Asia, Regional Cooperation and OSCE at the European External Action Service. Warm welcome for you, Michael. He has really great experience also on the entire region over many years as a German diplomat. Great pleasure to have Katerina Maternova, the Deputy Director-General in charge of Eastern Neighborhood, Economic Investment Plans and Relations with IFIS and acting head of the support group for Ukraine at DGAP. Very much engaged in the region. Very warm welcome also for you, Katerina, on this panel. You have to leave 15 minutes earlier, so we will have this in mind also as a moderator. It's great pleasure to have Kristina Gerasimov, who is head of the Office of the President of Moldova and Senior Policy Advisor to the President of the Republic of Moldova. So really a key person in the reform process and with regard also to the policy of the President of Moldova. Warm welcome for you also, Kristina. And we have Vano Chikwadze, who is EU Integration Program Officer at Open Society Georgia Foundation, and also part of our think tank network. So we also wanted to particularly set here a person also from our think tank network. So Vano, also a warm welcome to you. I would like to ask to all of you in the first round, and let's have like 3 or 4 minutes. What do you expect from the Eastern Partnership Summit? So let's have an open question also and ask for your expectations towards the summit. And let's start with Michael Siebert for the first speaker, and then we will go further with Katerina.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Stefan, for nicely introducing this panel, and thank you for having me here. I'm very honored. It's the network that you mentioned, the think tank network on the Eastern Partnership is a very important tool for us also to get input, get fresh thinking, get discussions on what we are doing here as the European institutions. We value that very much. What do I expect from the summit? You mentioned it. There has not been a summit for a couple of years. I think it's 4 years. 2017 in Riga was the last one. So the fact that finally a summit can take place is a strong political statement as such already, and that is all the more important in the very challenging geopolitical context that you already alluded to, Stefan. And we may talk about this a little later with more concrete examples. The situation is further exacerbated by the COVID pandemic in the region, and in both regions, we have to say, in the EU and in the region of partner countries. So overall, I would say it is the most important summit of the Eastern Partnership that has ever taken place. What does it need to do? It has, first of all, to send a very strong political message of unity and commitment to this Eastern Partnership process. It needs also to foster the solidarity with our partners in this challenging context. Very important for us, it has to highlight the common values and the fundamentals that govern our partnership. For us, this is the rule of law, the good governance, democracy, and the preservation of human rights. Then, on this basis, there is a concrete, future-oriented new agenda based on the 3 building blocks that we have defined: recovery, resilience, and reform. And these 3 main building blocks are organized in 2 pillars. One is the governance. I already alluded to the values. They are represented in the governance pillar, and the other one is the investment pillar. It is there is an economic and investment plan that will be very substantial, and it will be leveraged by more financing tools to a very high level. So basically, the summit should set the tone for the future of our partnership, strengthen the resilience of the partner countries, enhance the sectoral cooperation for those looking into that direction and being more ambitious, enhance post-COVID recovery, further also foster our cooperation on security, especially on cyber and hybrid, and guide our work, our joint work in the spirit of balanced inclusiveness and differentiation. And I'm sure we will talk about that later in more details. There are many challenges, but our motivation to work on them and to cooperate on them is as big as the challenges are. So I hope that the summit will confirm that the partnership has a positive and transformative influence and will propose a strong and stable framework for the next years for our cooperation, ultimately make a difference on people's lives in partner countries.
Thank you very much. Thank you for to point out these, I think, key issues also the EU is looking on. Let's ask also Katarina Maternova. So what do you expect from the summit? I think the DGAP has prepared quite a lot of in this context, and I think was very, very active. And so I think there are high expectations also. So what do you expect from this summit?
Thank you very much, Stefan. And you will see how well aligned the different EU institutions in Brussels are, since indeed the content of the Eastern Partnership deliverables and the plans for the future architecture of engagement with Eastern partners around the two pillars of governance and the economic investment plan is something that we work on together. So I'll get to that in a second. Just to say, look, since the last get together in Brussels in 2017, indeed, a long time has gone and a lot has happened. And honestly, the Eastern Partnership countries, but this is probably reflective of the tumult worldwide, is in a difficult situation. I think we are observing the use of disinformation, cyber attacks, sending refugees, withholding gas supplies, preventing coal supplies being transported, etc., all used as a hybrid weapon. And this is all happening in the background of very, very active diplomatic activity, alarmed of the Western allies, alarmed by the huge military buildup over by Russia on the eastern border of Ukraine. So the setting for the Eastern Partnership Summit is indeed one of quite some high tensions. I just came back from Chisinau yesterday, my third trip to Moldova in the last half a year to discuss with the government how to really use the window of opportunity that you also mentioned when talking about Christina, and at the same time really very quickly build resilience to be able to go through winter and the years forward with stable energy supply. So we really are in a situation of not an easy one. And I think the motto of my former commissioner always said that we will either export stability or we will import instability, never can be more true than now. I think that the stability, prosperity in the EU also is very much influenced by the stability and prosperity and peace of our eastern neighbors and vice versa. So I think that just looking at the map, we influence each other very much. And so I think that the expectations of the summit are framed also by this reality. Now, can the summit deliver on that? We'll see. We will have to see. We are still discussing very actively even the statement that will come out of the summit. We are not there yet, but we very much hope that, as Mikhail said, we will be able to convey the commitment of the EU to this region, as well as support of the EU to our Eastern partners and expectations of our Eastern partners in return. And so I think that the framework that we put together, the two pillars of engagement, one talking about governance and rule of law and build up of resilient institutions, I think is an important element, but so is the other bit, which is investment in the prosperity and in functioning economies that will deliver for citizens and will be able to keep the reforms on track. We are going to mobilize over the next, I mean, in the current we plan monies in 7-year increments. So for the 7-year period, 21 to 27, we will mobilize 2.3 billion euros. And we very much hope that with the use of our innovative instruments of guarantees and with the use of blending, we'll be able to perhaps mobilize somewhere close to 17 billion. But that's very much dependent on the continued reforms, on the fiscal capacity, on the borrowing capacity, and collaboration with our financial institution partners. Some of the concrete shorter-term deliveries that will be already discussed at the summit is Eastern Partnership trade help desks, for example, to help answer questions for businesses that are interested in exporting to the EU. We are also going to be doing some signatures with EBRD and EIB of programs for the Eastern Partnership. There are going to be low emission buses in Yerevan, for example, or support for SMEs in Azerbaijan, or energy efficiency in public buildings program in Moldova, just to name the few. And last but not least, and I think Mikhail alluded to that, it's not only the political situation that is complex, energy security situation, etc. But let's not forget we are approaching second COVID Christmas, and the COVID pandemic has really fell very, very hard on our Eastern partner neighbors, both in terms of the politics, in terms of, in fact, extremely low vaccination rates due to the very pervasive disinformation scene on that, and last but not least, the really devastating impact on the economies. I mean, all of the Eastern partners are very dependent on small and medium-sized enterprises for their economic vibrancy, and these kind of businesses have been particularly hard. And I'm not even talking about the impact on learning by kids who were not able to go through full learning cycle, etc. So this is, in all the discussion of politics, we try not to forget that the situation is dire also on the economic side, and that's where we continue supporting also the work of WHO in the East, and also support our Eastern partners through vaccine deliveries. So I will stop at that.
Thank you very much. And also, I think it's very important to mention also the impact of the COVID pandemic on the region and on the countries in the region. I think it's from a EU perspective, where you have enough vaccine and there are a lot of programs. I think it's not so much seen also how vulnerable these societies and economies are, and how important the support also of the EU is with this regard, and we are really looking forward to the summit conclusions also. And as I understand you right, so it's still in the negotiations, so it will be really in the last moment. So let's switch to Kristina Gerasimov. Kristina, I think for Moldova in this very particular situation, in this, I think, really challenging reforms, but I think the best situation in which Moldova was in the past decades, in terms of opportunities for reforms. I think the support from the Commission and from the EU is very important for you, and I think for you it's also important. So what do you expect from this summit, also for Moldova?
Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's really great to be back. I think, well, if we look at what's going to happen next week, I think the summit really needs to send a very strong political signal that the next years are really going to be about strengthening our resilience, both as a region and also as individual countries. Because in my opinion, more resilient countries in the region overall are going to lead to faster recovery, and they are going to lead to more sustainable reforms. At the same time, to make this process more sustainable, we really need to keep focus on what I would say the first pillar and probably the most difficult reforms, not only for Moldova, but for the entire region. And that is strengthening the rule of law and the reform of the justice sector. I think Moldova was a very good example in the last years that only with independent and accountable judges and prosecutors it will be possible to strengthen the business climate, to attract investment, to create new jobs and increase standards of living. I mean, we have seen quite a strong correlation between those factors, and there is strong determination with the new government in Chisinau to proceed on these difficult reforms. The second pillar, as Katarina has mentioned, is also, I think, a big expectation also in Chisinau. We need to focus on strengthening critical infrastructure, not only in Moldova, but across the region, and particularly in rural areas, if you ask me, from roads to railways to schools and hospitals. And again, if we can do it also across the region with neighboring countries, this will strengthen in a way our collective regional resilience, which I think should be our common end goal. In addition, of course, I cannot not mention that the summit, and these are expectations, I think, particularly among the associated trio, that it needs to stress the importance of the principle of differentiation, where countries' paths we see are becoming more and more diverse. At the same time, there is an expectation to commit to developing more mechanisms that are embedded in the more for more principle. Sectorial integration here is a big expectation from the summit as well, which should hopefully lead, in time to further strengthening of the goals of political association and economic integration of the countries which are willing to seek closer ties with the EU, like the three associated partners. In this sense, the Eastern Partnership Summit is really a unique opportunity to commit not only to a common set of values, but also to a more ambitious practical agenda about how do we move forward together. And we're quite confident on our side from what we've seen so far on paper, but what's going to be implemented in reality is that the economic and the investment plan that is proposed for the Eastern Partnership and its flagship initiatives for the partner countries will help us work together towards achieving this goal. And I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this perspective also from Moldova. Looking to Georgia, Vano from Open Society Foundation in Georgia, I think Georgia is really in a challenging period at the moment after the elections. I think the EU has been very much also engaged in solving this crisis, and I think it is challenging, really. Yeah, we see. So, what do you expect from the summit for Georgia and maybe for the South Caucasus also?
Thank you, Stefan, and I also want to join and express my appreciation to DGNIR and also German Council on Foreign Relations for organizing this very timely event. Let me divide my intervention into two parts. It's easier for us to say what we are not expecting from the summit than what we are really expecting. So basically, starting from what we are expecting, as it was already mentioned here, organizing a summit in a physical way, it's a very important and a very crucial milestone. What we are expecting, also considering and going through the joint staff working document, we see that there is a lot of financial resources earmarked for supporting the infrastructural projects here in the country, and also addressing the number one challenge and number one priority of the individuals here, which is unemployment, because officially almost every four Georgian citizen is unemployed in the country. Considering all these latest developments between the EU-Georgia relations, we're expecting that there will be much more conditionality coming from Brussels, and we also expect that there will be less for less principles being applied from the EU's future financial support being allocated for Georgia. Also, there is much expectations when it comes to the policy of digitalization, also supporting the promotion of green economy, energy security, as well as environment. And last but not least, this is also very crucial that EU support is going actually to provide much more support when it comes to the scholarships and educating students and scholars in the EU universities. But the list is larger, as I said, when it comes to the what we are not expecting from the summit. First and foremost, we still don't expect that there will be the answer to the eternal question about what is the future of the Eastern Partnership, because there is still no kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's a key issue. And each and every summit, ahead of each and every summit, this is a question which we're expecting to get some kind of answer, but still we're missing it, and we don't expect that this answer will be provided at this summit. We also don't expect any kind of large-scale political offers, not to Georgia, but also to other countries. And I think that this is somehow balanced by offering much more financial resources to the EAP countries. Namely, for Georgia, as we calculated, it's more than 1 billion euro in next 3 or 4 years, which is really very crucial for our economy. We also expect acknowledgement, actually, that Georgia is unfortunately no longer the baby poster of the Eastern Partnership. It's no longer the front runner. Unfortunately, it's rather became a naughty people in the class, which unfortunately, again, we made a lot of mistakes. And we also saw that in less than 1 year, basically, we failed reforming judiciary. We abandoned the EU-US agreement. I mean, the agreement which was supported by EU and mediated by EU and the US. And we also saw several verbal attacks on some of the leaders of the EU member states coming from the leaders of Georgian Dream. And we also see that steadily and gradually Georgia is becoming the captured state. And what is also very worrisome, we don't see that there might be the recognition of the emergence of the trio format, where we as a civil society are trying to invest a lot to provide some ideas. We are together with our Moldovan and Ukrainian colleagues trying to elaborate the concrete ideas what needs to be done to promote our engagement internally, I mean, between Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, and also to have much more engagement with the European Union. So basically, this is what we are expecting and what we are not expecting in next week at the summit.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for both. I think this is also somehow a feedback maybe from Georgia and from the region, also from civil society. Yeah, but I think you still expect quite a lot of. Yeah, so I think that's also good to hear. Let's have a second round, and I really would like to invite also the auditorium to ask more questions. I think there are already first questions in. Please go on Slido and ask these questions, and we will read out them after this second round. And I now have to everybody a concrete question I would like to ask, and let's start again with Michael Siebert. Looking into the latest Eastern Partnership documents, I think the strategic importance of the countries of the region and a strong commitment to a common area of democracy, prosperity, and stability is in these documents, yeah, is visible. So we observe at the same time the growing challenges. I think we already mentioned many of them. And I think they are also in terms of security, but also in terms of domestic backsliding or democratic backsliding, we can also observe. But I think it's a lot of about geopolitics and also security. So where do you see the main answers of the EU policy to achieve its goals in the Eastern neighborhood, having in mind these growing challenges also we can observe? Please, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan, for this question. We dive a little bit deeper into the debate, and let me first say, before concretely answering in some points your question, that what we are doing in the Eastern Partnership with our partners is not out of pure altruism, of course, because we are sitting in the same boat. We face situations that affect both of us, the European Union as much as the partner countries. And the environment that has been mentioned, COVID and the geopolitical environment, of course, also concerns both of us. So starting with the geopolitical situation, the EU, with its Eastern Partnership, is faced with first of all, the situation in Belarus. We will see the summit having an empty chair for Belarus, which reminds us that we are still with the people of Belarus while we are not recognizing Mr. Lukashenko and his regime. So we will, in the framework of the summit, in the days before and around, we will have meetings that will make visible that we are still with democratic Belarus, with the people, with the civil society. That is one aspect. Moldova has been a good example also with the recent gas crisis that was mastered for the time being, and we're very happy about it. The EU certainly contributed to that very quickly in terms of expertise, in terms of helping Moldova to cope with this very unusual sudden situation. And we will be on Moldova's side for the time to come, because the crisis may be over for the moment, but not in the mid and long term. We also look at Ukraine with the current threatening attitude from Russia, where we don't know exactly whether something and what might happen, but there are heightened concern about possible actions from the Russian side, and we are on the side of Ukraine. We are giving clear messages that any further infringement on the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Ukraine would have very severe consequences from the European Union side, together with like-minded partners. We also look at the conflict in Karabakh, which has been transformed through the war last year, and European Union is trying to help with concrete offers to bring the parties together in various formats, to help with concrete topics like the delimitation, demarcation of the border, with getting freeing the last prisoners of war of Armenia, facing the mine fields and trying to contribute to clear them in mainly in Azerbaijan, and to enhance the connectivity to the region through the Black Sea into the Caucasus, and then further over the Caspian to Central Asia. These are just some examples on the geopolitical situation. I may also add that we have heightened our cooperation in terms of security, which has a long time been asked by partners. We very concretely look at the hybrid threats with them, at cyber threats. They already participate in CSDP missions of the European Union. Just a couple of days ago, we gave funds from the European Peace Facility to 2 countries, namely Ukraine and Georgia. And together we are tackling disinformation in our area. I wanted to also add one word on the question of inclusiveness and the trio that has been addressed also by Vano. The Eastern Partnership, in our view, should remain inclusive. When you look at a country like Armenia, there are big hopes that they are not left behind or left out while associate partners are moving forward more quickly and more decisively. Also, we want to keep the door open for Belarus, which under the current regime has been pulled out from the partnership, but we will be happy to welcome back Belarus. And we have prepared a big plan for democratic Belarus, 3 billion economic support plan. At the same time, we see that some parties, especially the 3 associated ones, want to move forward quicker. And we are looking concretely at sectoral cooperation with those interested to deepen our cooperation in areas like trade, like connectivity, like environment, and the digital. So there are many new areas that we are looking at, including helping the countries to build back better after the COVID pandemic in terms of green and digital transformation, which are very important topics for the objectives for the European Union as such, and we want to do it together with partners. So basically, coming for the last point back to my initial remarks, to achieve all that, we believe that living our common values, creating trusted institutions, functioning institutions that the citizens can live well with, especially judicial reforms that create a trusted judicial system, are at the core of all that I mentioned before. It will help the partner countries to achieve everything that is in this cooperation program much better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you also mentioned the associated trio, and I would like to ask Katharina, talking about the more for more principle and the joint staff working document from this year. So where do you see the opportunities for countries who want more rapprochement with the EU, like the associated trio of Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine?
As you can see, our script continues to be well aligned with Mikhail. Just want to say that look, the 6 Eastern Partnership countries have very different ambitions when it comes to the EU. Some have signaled readiness and eagerness to join the EU, others have not. And this and in between there is quite a big spectrum. So yes, we very much want to keep Eastern Partnership as an inclusive platform, and there are areas which really call for inclusive approaches also in the sectoral sphere. For example, connectivity cuts across regimes, right? Roads and railways and broadband connections, or in the environment we all share. But there are other areas which, notably through the signature of the association agreements and the DCFTA, the Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Areas, brought a whole huge set of obligations and expectations onto the shoulders of the 3 associate countries. So in that sense, it's not going against the inclusiveness, it's building a completely different set of interactions and engagements that we have in the different sectoral areas, which go beyond what we can do with partners who are not associated. So I think Armenia, that Mikhail mentioned, is a good case. Armenia, of course, if it chooses to sign an association agreement, and then DCFTA would be absolutely welcome. So far, that choice has not been made by Armenia, and that was the spirit in which last week the 3 prime ministers of the associated countries of Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia that were in town met with the 3 presidents of the EU institutions: President von der Leyen, President Michel of the Council, President Sassoli of the European Parliament. And I think they received really a strong welcome to having increased ambitions, because they match what is in our agreements. And so what I just want to make clear, that the association agreements, and especially the trade part, which is not only a trade agreement, it's very much a regulatory alignment agreement, which actually front loads a tremendous number of obligations and reforms onto the shoulders of the 3 associate countries, while the benefits are more backloaded. And we can see that in the tempered increase of the trade flows with the EU, and in the fact that there is, trading with the EU is complicated, because we have the best standards in the world, and we do have very complex regulatory environment. So for the countries to be able to be part of that in specific sectors is a difficult task. And that's why we are supporting the associate countries in this process. We have programs that help them with for example, technical standards or phytosanitary rules that they need to comply by in order to export into the EU market. So the discussion, notably with the President of the Commission, was along the lines of agreeing to having meetings between ministers from the 3 countries and specific sector commissioners. Trade is the most obvious one. You have others like energy security, like digital and cyber cooperation, looking at emulating the Green Deal dialogue we have with Ukraine, with the other countries, just to make sure that we can take the full benefit mutually of the association agreements and the CFTAs, because it's not that, oh, these were signed some years ago, they've been all implemented and we need to move on. There is actually great scope to go much deeper in sectoral cooperation in the very agreements that we still have. For example, in the case of Ukraine, it specifically talks about internal market treatment in some sectors. And I think we still have quite ways to go. And therefore, I think that on the side of the EU institutions, we need to step up to the ambitions of the agreements that we have signed, and in fact engage in this dialogue, which is not the case with the other 3 countries in the Eastern Partnership. Therefore, it's important to keep the inclusive nature of the dialogue in areas where it makes sense to engage with all 6, And then we can also have dialogues that make sense with the three-leg trade that I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you for taking this question. Let's ask Christina. We mentioned already this is the most reform-oriented government, but also a president at the same time in Moldova. But we also see how many challenges the country is facing. So what are the main urgent, I would say, needs from the EU, and in which areas Brussels can support Moldova at this moment, where your country is?
Indeed, Stefan, I think you're exactly right. These are unique political circumstances in Moldova, where one pro-European political party, which is highly committed to conduct genuine reforms, managed to win the votes or enough votes to form the government on its own. And this opens many, many doors for the new government and also incredible opportunities. And in this context, also many practitioners say, that comparing to 2009, 2010, the openness of the international community to help is much greater than it was 10 years ago. However, it's not so easy. What this government has inherited from the previous ones, I think signals also what are our current needs and challenges. Very weak state institutions, still, corrupt practices and rent-seeking schemes in many public institutions, and most importantly, international challenges that it cannot overcome alone, and that requires also international support and coordination. At the same time, we saw that the society gave the majority in parliament a very strong mandate for change, and it's clear that at the core of this change lies the expected reform of the rule of law. And we know from the region, and not only that there are extremely few countries in the region who have succeeded at these difficult reforms, but there is significant political will today to make it work this time. So if looking at the needs, the domestic ones and the biggest domestic drawback of Moldova at the moment is the government's limited capacity to increase the speed of transformations. Of the reform agenda of the government. This, as a result, requires very serious prioritization of reforms, but also, we know that the ambitions are very high, expectations are even higher, and not delivering faster is really a frustration both to the society, but also to the government, and this has the potential to grow even more. Here, the limited capacity to communicate on time on what is done and what is not done by the government is also an impediment where we need more support, particularly because there are so many reforms that are planned and are all extremely important to, strengthen overall the state. Be it justice, energy, infrastructure, public finance, public administration reform, and so on. These are all really serious needs for this country to put the fundamentals in place to strengthen the way forward. But they, of course, cannot be conducted all at once. So here, another aspect of the needs is, of course, what we see in the region. One of them is a stable security environment that is necessary for the government to be able to focus on the domestic agenda. This has been proven more difficult than probably initially expected. The security challenges in the region are a big concern and have the potential really to slow down some of the reforms, but also reprioritize them. So for instance, this autumn, Moldova faced a serious energy crisis. No one expected the reform of the energy sector to become a key priority for the government at this moment in time. But the very high prices on gas, the need to negotiate a new long-term contract created the preconditions for Moldova to rethink the importance of its energy security and make some really bold moves, such as setting up the first tender for gas procurement in its history within less than 10 days. I think it's an achievement that no government ever dared to think of in the last 3 decades, but this one succeeded. So Moldova also in this regard, needs to focus on diversifying its energy resources, something that it doesn't have domestically. The gas crisis we went through has proven how vulnerable the country is, and that this needs to be prioritized. So there is, a serious intention to invest in renewables, domestic production, and storage of energy sources. And all of this, of course, keeping in mind and the need to look for the environment. Another need is to stabilize the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economy, which has hit very hard Moldova, be it the frontline workers or the entrepreneurs or the farmers, the elderly, the other vulnerable social groups all need scaled up support to go through this economic crisis, but not only healthcare crisis or multiple crises. And also what it seems to be coming ahead of us, a very difficult winter season due to the increased gas prices. So if now, to turn to Brussels and how it has supported us in this last year, I think it's very clear that since the presidential elections last autumn, the country has enjoyed huge support, both from Brussels, but also from individual member states' capitals. The Commission, the Council, the European Parliament have all reacted practically instantly to the political changes in Chișinău. In between the visit in February of President Sandu to Brussels and her second visit this year for the EP summit coming next week, we have significantly scaled up our political dialogue. We have benefited from economic assistance, and most important, I think, a lot of flexibility and immediate reaction to our needs was proven. And here, as examples, we could just look at how quickly the economic recovery plan of 600 million euros was put together in less than 4 months. The assistance and the amount of attention during the energy crisis, as a more recent example, was also really significant. For those who work in Brussels or know how Brussels work, to put together 60 million euros in grant to support immediate needs of the country, it really represents a strong signal that where there is political will, there is immediate support from Brussels that can be mobilized. That's at least my lesson drawn from this year. So Brussels, but also individual capitals of EU member states also support us in strengthening the very much needed capacity to conduct reforms. To conclude, I can really safely say that Moldova at the moment needs to focus on 2 things only. One is to absorb the help that it requested and is on the way of receiving already. And 2, to think more strategically on how to prioritize the planned reforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, for mentioning all this. So final question to Vano. We already mentioned democratic backsliding in Georgia. I mentioned also the involvement of Charles Michel and the EU delegation in solving this crisis and helping to solve this crisis. But it's still, so it's not solved finally. So I think it was really a great help, but I think it is going on. And the question is, where do you see the EU's role in helping to stop further this democratic backsliding?
Well, indeed, I think that EU has been doing a great job here in order to minimize this polarization what we have here. But at the same time, we all acknowledge that it is not just the European Union who should do the job that us, the civil society, Georgian people, and also particularly the politician, and even much more particularly the ruling Georgian Dream Party has to do. And this is the job which takes to diminish this polarization as much as possible, to acknowledge this responsibility that they have here. When it comes to the European Union, I think that EU has to be tougher and to exercise tough love when it comes to Georgia. We acknowledge that EU is more and more outspoken when it comes to the shortcomings and violations of these reforms in the judiciary. But at the same time, I think that the EU has to be much more outspoken when it comes to the potential cases of high-level corruption, as well as more and more signs of the state capture. Otherwise, it would be too late in coming months or coming years. And also, I think that when it comes to the EU's involvement, it should also start considering the scenario of implying the sanctions in cooperation with the US against those who are standing behind this captured state. I also want to send a very clear message, since we have the representatives of the Commission and the EAS. We are very much expecting the end of the negotiations of the association agenda. This is an extremely useful tool in our hands of the civil society to keep the government accountable. But unfortunately, it's now more than 1 year that we don't have a new association agenda, which does not really help us to exercise our duty in that regard, keeping the accountability of the authorities. And also two more issues. One is supporting the emergence of the trio, or not hampering this, because we don't have an expectation that there should not be any kind of breakdown of the Eastern Partnership. This is much more about the differentiation, keeping the format of the Eastern Partnership, but differentiation, and not making the country to be a hostage of those who don't really want to come closer to the European Union. And last but not least, again, we have to be very careful and to work on a very slippery road in order to ensure that when we have next summit, hopefully in 2 years' time, we don't have any more empty chairs there, but to have all 6 countries being represented there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for being also short and making these points. I want to hand over to the questions, and let's start with 2 colleagues from the think tank network, maybe with Panagiotta Manoli, and then I'll also have Pavel Havlicek to read out, or to ask their questions, and then I will read out more questions also here from Slido. And since Katarina has to leave earlier, maybe I will also start then with her to answer some of the questions. So maybe we let Panagiotta in to ask the direct video question. She has also one in the chat, if this is possible. Pavel is there, so maybe we start with Pavel. Pavel, maybe you just ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Greetings from Prague to everybody. I had a question that I actually shared with via Slido. That is a question that is elaborating on what was mentioned by Christina already, dealing with the security. This was somehow touched upon by both Michael and Katarina, but also it would be very interesting to find out more actually about this future EU approach towards security as an agenda of the Eastern Partnership. We know that there are severe restrictions by some of the member states, particularly in western and southern flank of the Union. So maybe if you could elaborate what concretely you would be having in mind related to the future approach to cybersecurity that you mentioned, but also to hybrid threats. We were in the past advocating in favor of basically including the associated trio into the European architecture in this sense, the hybrid center in Helsinki, but also much stronger cooperation with the EU Stratcom task force dealing with the Eastern European affairs, and so on and so forth. So what concretely you would be having in mind when it comes to the future agenda in this area? Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I don't know if we can have Panagiotta here also. I can also read out her question. Yeah, here we are. Okay, great. So,
sorry, previously I was not in the panelist there, so I could hear you, but I couldn't actually join the discussion.
Now you are
thanks
here.
For giving me the floor. Thanks a lot for the brilliant discussion since this morning. Well, the question that I have raised refers to a feeling that we have that the Eastern Partnership is somehow taken hostage probably by Russia, because we see this a strong hand that Russia has applied in the region, and that it seems also that the summit today in the next days is going to take place under Moscow's shadow somehow. What are exactly the aspects, or which are the aspects of the partnership that can deliver, given this intense geopolitical and security competition. And we've heard previously that the discussions raised already this issue of the security competition. So given the current competition in terms of geopolitical and security aspects, what are the EAP aspects that are actually delivered? And do you think that the return of the United States here in the region can give a new impetus or a potential of the Eastern Partnership? Thanks a lot.
Can you shortly introduce yourself?
Yes, apologies for this. I'm Panagiotta Manoli. I'm a professor at the University of the Peloponnese and the research associate of Eliamet in Athens, Greece.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I give these questions to Katerina and to Michael at this point. I think that makes sense, and then I will read out more questions. So Katerina, maybe you can respond first this time.
I can try, but both questions are much more firmly in Michael's domain. So I'll just say a few words on my side. The programs that we have already started and which we are very much scaling up are programs under cybersecurity arena, including disinformation, and actually working with East Stratcom. And we started, for example, the first ever security dialogue with Ukraine this summer, and we will continue working with them on cyber resilience and resilience to hybrid threats. I will leave the broader security aspects to Michael, because that's more under the European Peace Facility and within the CSDP type of collaboration with the missions. But what we have done already in the previous planning cycle, and now we are strongly increasing it, is the work on disinformation and cyber resilience with the partners. And I think that especially going forward, this is going to feature very prominently. This is including support to the authorities, but also supporting private actors around, the fact checkers and the various civil society institutions that need to support that. We also are supporting the institutions against economic crime and corruption, since corruption is one of the very clear hybrid weapons that has been used in the region very creatively, and so that's one of the areas we support. And I will leave the question on Russia and broader security to Mikhail. And apologies, but I have to run to another meeting. So it's really fantastic to be here with you. And thanks again to the DGAP for organizing the event with us.
Thank you. Can I just, Katerina, I would just ask Michael to wait a moment, because there are two questions to you, I think, and you still have 5 minutes, as I know, and I want to use this opportunity to ask you these two questions. There is from Vera Rikova from the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum. There is a question directly to you on the economic investment plan and country-specific flagship initiatives, which are to mobilize up to 2.3 billion euro, leveraging 17 billion euro in public-private investment to support the post-pandemic recovery. How exactly it is envisaged this 17 billion to leverage? To be leveraged also, so how they are used also in terms of leverage. And maybe you can also take the question from Sonja Schiffers from Heinrich Böll Foundation in the South Caucasus. Are there any plans to work out a green agenda for the Eastern Partnership, analogous to the green agenda for the Western Balkans? Are there synergies? Do you see synergies between European Green Deal and the Eastern Partnership to create, beyond merely having environmental and climate resilience as an objective for the Eastern Partnership post-pandemic 2020? So these two questions I would just let to you, and then I think you really have to leave.
Okay, thank you very much. And sorry, Mikhail, for jumping ahead of the queue now. I'll answer the two questions at the same time. First of all, the green agenda is very much part of our plans for the future of Eastern Partnership. It's one of the both the green transformation and the digital transformations are part of the 5 objectives under the Eastern Partnership for the future, as clearly laid out in the June document, the joint staff working document that talks about the 2 pillars, and within the investment pillar talks about both the digital and the green transformation. I mean, environment and the air we breathe, etc., is global. So it obviously is very important to work with our partners and our neighbors on this together. So that's very much part of the flagships for each of the countries. And just to explain, the flagships are just the first 5 most important projects we will work with each country, but the economic investment plan is broader for each country. So once one flagship is implemented or underway, we will add others, and I think that in every single country the green topic very much is visible among the flagships. Now, how do we get to the 17 billion? I mean, anytime I hear these huge numbers, I get queasy in my stomach, because I know what it takes to actually get there in terms of the administrative part and the implementation expectations. But the way we calculate the leverage is to the collaboration that we have with our financial institution partners, whether international financial institutions or national development banks of member states like KfW or AfD or the Polish BGK, etc. So they get cover from us through this new guarantee, this new de-risking instrument. And we also have a program, more long-standing program of blending. And once you combine these leveraged investments through these 2 instruments, that's how you get to these higher figures. But the figure that shows the EU commitment in terms of the grant resources is the figure of 2.3 billion, which is a real figure that we are programming, and then we extrapolate based on historical experience what it can leverage in terms of total investment.
Thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you also for your presence and also taking all the questions. Yeah, and I understand that you have to leave soon. So great pleasure also to have you here. So Michael, please,
Thanks,
maybe you.
Stefan.
Yeah, maybe. Michael, bye. Yeah, so it was good to have you here. Michael, maybe up to you to these 2 questions. More will come, but let's stick to these 2 questions. I think they are important.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will try to answer them kind of together, looking at the security situation and Russia in the region. First of all, the EU is not the institution that deals with hard security. There are others, as we know. That's not EU competence. But we are doing a lot on the regional conflicts where Russia is a country to reckon with, if I may say it like that. EU is one of the biggest contributors to the OSCE special monitoring mission in Ukraine. Recently upgraded the technical equipment of this mission in terms of observation drones, for instance. The EU is also supporting the OSCE co-chairs on the Karabakh conflict and is trying to offer help, as I mentioned in the beginning, in concrete ways also next to that. The EU in Georgia is running the EUMM, the mission in Georgia that looks at the difficult situation at the lines between the Tbilisi-controlled territory and Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The EU is part of the 5+2 on Transnistria, the grouping trying to settle this conflict. So we are doing what we can in this respect. At the same time, we try to increase the security of our partner countries. Just to give you a few examples, there are numerous ones. As this was being asked on cyber, we have Moldova and Ukraine. Both countries have adopted strategies and action plans on cybercrime. And all 6 EAP countries have set up specialized cybercrime units, and we are working concretely and on a continued basis with these institutions. Also on more broadly, for instance, security sector reform in Ukraine. We have an EU AM mission in Kiev dealing with that, and together with the institutions, security institutions in Ukraine, trying to modernize the security sector in the country. We have held informal strategic security dialogues with Georgia and Azerbaijan, for instance. Then we work together with partners who help us in our CSDP missions. For Georgia especially has 32 participants in EUTM Central Africa and also participates in EUTM Mali mission. And Moldova as well participates there. Ukraine is about to do that to participate in EU missions. Joint investigations are going on between EAP partner countries and Europol, the institution to fight crime and cooperate on that. So maybe one more, which seems to be banal, but we have seen that this is a very important factor for the security of citizens. 5 regional guidelines and tools were developed to address flood risk management. We have seen this in Germany and Belgium and Holland recently, how deadly this can be, and to raise awareness about disasters and civil protection volunteering. So there's a very broad area of security cooperation, from our participation in the settlement of big conflicts to these very practical things on the security of citizens against natural disasters.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I will read out 2 questions to Christina. I think they are both important questions. First one is from Yasser Mamadov. What measures are being taken in Moldova to combat corruption? Which international organizations support it? So I think the whole issue, how you deal with corruption at the moment, what measures you are taking. And the second question is from Milanic, my colleague. Are gas deliveries from Russia solved for the winter season, or do you expect new problems from Gazprom? And in such case, what could EU partners do to support in short term also Moldova, also having in mind the connector and its functionality? So maybe these 2 questions directly to you, Christina.
Thank you, Stefan. On the question of what measures the government undertakes on corruption, I think here we are now in the process of looking at the existing infrastructure of anti-corruption institutions in Moldova and rethinking their efficiency. We, at the same time, are launching now, the Ministry of Justice is launching now a procedure for the extraordinary evaluation of judges and prosecutors. So these are some of the big frames of what is going to happen. But at the same time, I have to admit that we do see changes within the system already. We do see the prosecution becoming more active at its own initiative. We do see that there is an increase in judges leaving the system. So I think that the political strong signal that was given by the government that it's very serious about the reforms that need to be undertaken or are planned to be undertaken have provoked some dynamics and new developments in the system itself. I will not go into the details of what other measures, but I think these are the two kind of key flagship ones that are currently in the process of putting on a rolling basis. On the gas deliveries, whether there are any whether we expect any new problems, I think the fact that we do have a contract with Gazprom is a development that gives us certainty for the next years. We do not see any problems when it comes to the volumes that are being provided. This is this was a big problem in October, because even though we had a contract, we had lower volumes that were delivered than what was the necessary volumes, to keep up the pressure in the pipelines. So this is not there anymore. We did have a point in the protocol that was signed by Deputy Prime Minister Spino in St. Petersburg that said that the Moldovan side was supposed to help the consumers in a way pay the gas consumption for a period of time this winter. This is something that we ended up with, a 48 hours notice that the gas deliveries might stop if the payment would not be done. Here there was a payment of cash flow with Moldova Gas that is expected not to happen anymore. But here, the views are different, because we're still expecting to see how consumers are going to react to the first bill that is, going to be sent out tomorrow. And we're not very sure here whether Moldova Gas will be able to have enough money to be able to pay the next volumes that are booked for the period. So these are technical issues, but to be, a bit more abstract, what happened this autumn, I think was a good lesson to understand that we don't have experience with reforming the sector. We have been fully dependent as a country from a single source supply of gas. And the fact that we are willing to reform the sector, the fact that we have support from Brussels, but also other partners to have this reform implemented in the upcoming years. We don't know how, what reaction this will trigger from Russia and from Gazprom. So far, I think we should not be experiencing any upcoming immediate problems, but the government is ready to develop, the necessary measures so that we do not get to a similar condition that we were only a month ago.
Thank you. There are several questions to Michael Siebert, but I would give Michael the last word and ask two questions to Vano, also from a Georgian perspective or from a South Caucasus perspective. So I would ask you to Vano. Here's the last question from Moritz Kleff. How can we expand European influence in the region without triggering Russia further, having in mind that all Western involvement in the region is at least considering competition, to use the diffuse term? So from a Georgian perspective, Vano, how to deal with Russia, not to increase tensions with Russia? I would frame it looking into the South Caucasus and looking also on Georgia. And maybe you can also answer partly this first question is an enhanced information campaign in order to promote EU in Eastern Partnership countries envisaged? And how do you see this presence? I reframe it a little bit. How do you see this presence of the EU in Georgia, and the whole issue of disinformation? Also, what is going on? Where do you see here the link, and where would you maybe demand also improvement in terms of communication and presence? Let's frame these two questions to Georgia. I think that these are also important questions.
Yes, sure. Well, starting from the first question, I think that it's very, very hard to make any kind of step that would bring Georgia or South Caucasus closer to the European Union and not irritate to Russia. Looking at this action through the prism of Moscow is a kind of, not a right approach, because EU should be a power who's a player here in the region, rather than being afraid that making any kind of promoting democracy here might irritate Russia. Russia might be irritated in any case, whatever it happens in this regard. So I don't think that this is a right approach, having Russia first in mind in this regard, whether we like it or not. When it comes to the information and disinformation campaign, when it comes to the European Union, I think that EU is doing a lot. If we look at the campaigns and the financial assistance which are allocated for Georgia in order to reach out to the broader society, it's very significant, But at the same time, I think that there is a huge room of improving this, improving engagement with the citizens. We have the association agreement in place already 7 years, and we need to concentrate on those achievements and bringing the benefits that was brought by the association agreement to the ordinary citizens. I think that this is where the state authorities as well as the European Union has to do more in order to explain and to convey the messages to the citizens. What are the benefits that Georgia got so far from the EU integration process?
Thank you very much. And last questions to Michael Siebert. I think the first question you already answered on countering cyber and hybrid threats, so I don't want to repeat this question. I think one interesting question here from Iris Kempe, also having in mind that you worked before in the German Foreign Office, also were responsible for the new Ostpolitik, and looking now from Brussels also what is going on in Berlin, in terms of Eastern policy. So where do you see maybe also here the links between Eastern Partnership and the German Eastern policy? Let's call it like this. I think where do you see the links between both, and where do you see the opportunities maybe also with the new government? So that would be the first question. Also having in mind that you have been responsible for the South Caucasus in the past, and I think you have quite good experience. I think here a question on EU-Azerbaijan strategic partnership agreement, which is still under pending. 3 years ago, two sides stated that they are very close to reaching a new partnership agreement with over 90% of the issues in question already decided. So how long it will take now for the rest? So where are we now with Azerbaijan? I don't know if this is the main question about this 10%, or if there are other main questions. So where do you see here the main challenges? And maybe if you find have time, for what funding mechanism have been developed to directly support beneficiaries, no matter what government is in the country, to become more resilient? So looking beyond the current political the political elite who governs the country, how to strengthen resilience beyond this, looking maybe more to the society and media and so on. So maybe these three questions, Michael.
Thank you, Stefan. Sorry, the last one was a general one on Eastern Partnership countries.
Yes, it's a general one on funding mechanism on Eastern Partnership countries, supporting resilience behind the governments. So if there are changing governments, and maybe also governments who are not always supporting rule of law, resilience in a way, how to support resilience beyond these kind of governments, or anyway beyond the governments.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will answer in reverse order, starting with this one, and saying that, yes, we, of course, work with the governments of the 5 countries at the moment. We more or less stopped the cooperation projects with the Belarusian government for obvious reasons. and reprogrammed a lot of those in a way that we can work with other partners in Belarus. This is a very important feature of the Eastern Partnership in general, that it is not only a cooperation between governments, it is also a cooperation with many stakeholders, from parliaments to NGOs, cities and local regional authorities, and there are many more, trade unions, stakeholders in society. The Eastern Partnership binds them together between the 6 countries and between the region and the European Union. And without going in too much detail on concrete funding lines, but we have a lot of opportunities to offer for cooperation of the non-governmental sector for projects. And this is indeed very important. It is important in those countries where the government doesn't follow the common values that we share at the moment, but it is also equally important in those countries where the governments cooperate with us. Because in any country, and this is the same in the European Union itself, a vibrant civil society is a main factor for resilience and for the good survival of a society. We are firmly on this basis in our projects. On Azerbaijan, on the partnership agreement, it has been negotiated for a couple of years. I don't want to talk about percentages, but I can confirm that there are many areas provisionally already agreed. But as we all know, in agreements, the rule is that unless everything is agreed, nothing is agreed. So there are still maybe 1 or 2 challenges to discuss, and we hope that this can be settled in the first half of next year. That is our ambition, and we see also a renewed willingness of the Azerbaijani partners to close this chapter and get to this agreement. The first question by Iris Kempe, how do we cooperate with the new German government? I mean, I may have worked for the old German government, but I'm not supposed to comment now on German policies. We see Germany from Brussels as a partner in the Eastern Partnership amongst the member states that is very, very dedicated to this partnership, has contributed a lot to the process where all stakeholders have made suggestions to the new agenda that we are going to now implement after the summit. And we are very optimistic that the new government will play a similarly important role, also contributing to bridging some differences between member states, as on any topic, also on the Eastern Partnership. There are sometimes nuances between partners in the EU, and we see the German government as one of those really trying to bridge these gaps and to come to a common united position on our relations with the Eastern partners. And that is a very important point, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. I would really like to thank all the speakers of this panel for their inputs and also for the answers. I think that has been a really very rich discussion which we had here. We could take a lot of questions also. I think that was really great. And yeah, I'm really looking for the summit. Yeah, and I think it's good and it's important also to ask what to expect and maybe also what is needed. Yeah, also and how this overlaps. I think it's really important. So I want to thank you again for your contributions. And we now take a break of nearly 50 minutes, and we then will have a spotlight event on the unresolved conflicts in the Eastern Partnership region, also with 3 speakers, 45 minutes. So I think that will be also a very interesting session. Yeah, and thank you for following us and asking questions. So I hope most of the people are staying, and I just say goodbye to our speakers here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan, and bye-bye to everybody.
Yeah, thanks a lot of.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you all. So let's slowly start with our second spotlight today in the framework of the Eastern Partnership think tank network. We just finished our high-level panel on the future of Eastern Partnership before the summit, and we now want to focus, I think, on the second very important issue after we had Belarus this morning, looking onto the unresolved conflicts in the Eastern Partnership region. We just had a war in Karabakh, but if we're looking into Donbass and the situation in Ukraine, it is very tense at the moment. So we have quite a lot of security challenges in the region, I think, especially in the South Caucasus, I would say we are far away from solving the conflict. I think we have a ceasefire agreement, but we have no peace agreement. We have tensions on the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So I think there are quite a lot of issues to discuss. And if we're staying in the South Caucasus, I think we have a creeping integration of Abkhazia, South Ossetia into Russia. We had this memorandum in the beginning of the year on Abkhazia, which I think had not sufficient attention between Russia and Abkhazia, which is a further step towards integration. And as I mentioned, I think Donbass, the situation there's a war going on. Yeah, so there's no frozen conflict or no. I think there's a lot of happening. In terms of a war, and you can even on some days say this is not a low intense war. Yeah, I think the people still dying. So I think there's quite a tense situation beside the military buildup of Russia on the border to Ukraine. And if we look into Moldova with Transnistria, I think we know also how vulnerable Moldova is because of this situation in Transnistria. Also dependency on electricity, for instance, from Transnistria, which has an impact also on the whole stability of the country, but also on the next steps and reforms in the country. Before I introduce this great three speakers we have here for the discussion, I just want to announce that we will not take questions from the chat, but we have Slido, and you will find in the chat the link to ask the questions, and you can also go on the future of Eastern Partnership on the Slido.com website, or you just scan now this code to ask questions. So very welcome also questions. We have only 45 minutes, but I'm very happy to introduce you now our three speakers, which is first Teuvo Klar, who is Special Representative for the South Caucasus and the crisis in Georgia at the European External Action Service. Warm welcome to you. We will then have Lawrence Meredith who is Director for Neighborhood, East and Institution Building at DGAP. So very important position also. Welcome also for you on this topic. And we have from our think tank network, I think this is also what we really like to have on every of the discussions here, or not most of the discussions. We will have Orisia Lucevich, who is Head and Research Fellow at the Ukraine Forum at the Russia-Eurasia program at Chatham House in London. Welcome, Orisia, also great to have you here. So let me start with specific questions. I would like to start with Teuvo. The EU and its member states have been criticized for on one hand being engaged on different levels in the Georgian conflict zones, but not sufficiently in the Karabakh conflict. There's a strong criticism from civil society that this inaction plays in the hand also of Russia and increases maybe also Russia's role again in the region. How would you respond to this criticism? And so where do you see the EU's role also on Karabakh, but in the South Caucasus, in the conflicts at all? So where is here the EU's role? Let's start with this question.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. Well, first of all, I would say that this criticism of the EU is a bit unjustified. And of course, an EU official would be saying that. But specifically as regards the Karabakh conflict, and specifically as regards the fighting last year and the war last year, the EU took a very clear position, which was that we support the Minsk Group co-chairs and the efforts of the Minsk Group co-chairs to achieve a ceasefire. And we didn't see it as being useful if the EU got squarely involved. But we were behind the Minsk Group co-chairs and of course specifically France as the European Minsk Group co-chair. So the EU was engaged, obviously, but we were engaged from the back because we didn't think that it would be useful to be right there and trying to meddle in efforts that already were being undertaken by others. Now, after the war, I would say that the EU has gradually increased its engagement. And by now, I would not really agree with the idea that the EU is not strongly engaged. I would say quite the contrary. The EU has, over the past year, provided 17 million in humanitarian assistance right off the bat, and that's only the EU. And if we add the member states, it adds up to 34 million. So we have been engaged in demining. Not directly, but through UNDP. We have been financing UNDP. We have supported spontaneous arrivals arriving in Armenia as a consequence of the conflict. So we have put money into this and quite important sums. On the political side, well, President Michel has been very actively engaged with the leaders of both Armenia and Azerbaijan. And it is common knowledge that we hope to see both leaders in Brussels next week, in the context of the Eastern Partnership Summit, of course, but also as in a separate format, meeting with President Michel. I myself, I have been very frequent visitor to the region. And we have now also been happy that we have been able to support also civil society contacts starting up again. It has been a difficult period, obviously, after war, but the EU has been very heavily engaged in actually helping to reestablish contacts and helping to, in this new situation, to actually bring about a sustainable peace. And so in our contacts with both the Armenian and Azerbaijani leaderships, we have proposed and we are proposing various ways of EU engagement. We managed, through President Michel's personal intervention again, to establish a direct hotline between the ministers of defense of Armenia and Azerbaijan. So if you want to look at who is heavily engaged in Armenia and Azerbaijan after the conflict, of course, you can look to Russia, but I think the EU has actually been much more engaged on the political level than we were before the war. And so that is my answer, that actually before the war and during the war, we were behind the Minsk Group co-chairs. We're supporting the Minsk Group co-chairs process. And of course, we're still doing that. But we are also seeing that in the changed circumstances, there is greater scope for the EU's own involvement. And we are seizing this opportunity. We have seized this opportunity, and we are looking to further expand our engagement in various ways, whether it is to support the sides in border delimitation, whether it's support further economic integration, also in the South Caucasus region more broadly, involving also Georgia. So I do believe that there's a lot that the EU has done and that the EU can do also in the future, also taking into account the specific relationship we have with all three South Caucasus countries as our Eastern partners, because while there's talk about different frameworks, the EU involving this region, in fact, the EU is the one that has the strongest relationship with all three South Caucasus countries, and therefore we can provide specific impetus and value added in this context that perhaps others cannot.
Thank you very much. Lawrence, representing DGAP, the Commission, I think the EU always has treated supporting civil society as the main priority. I think that is in every document and every speech. How to improve the interaction of civil society and the expert community and the EU on conflict mediation and resolution. I think there's especially in Armenia deep frustration also about support or limited support. So but it's overall question. So how to improve this kind of interaction of the EU with these groups, please.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. And let me start by underlining how important this subject is for the future of the Eastern Partnership, which is, I mean, we find it completely unacceptable that there are parts of the population that have, in 2021, difficulty accessing basic services, education, health, and so forth, in what are by far too many in Europe, forgotten conflicts. And of course, Ukraine and the conflicts in Ukraine have been very much center stage since, in particular since 2014, but too little is being done to resolve the unresolved conflicts of the Eastern Partnership. That's why on the side of the European Union, we put this center stage and have sending a strong signal already from the last summit that the European Union is keen to step up our engagement on these conflicts, to work with all parties to find a solution. And in that context, of course, the role of civil society is absolutely fundamental because precisely in times of conflict, it can be very difficult for governments, especially as we see now following the 44-day war last autumn and heightened tension between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It can be extremely difficult to bring governments together for obvious reasons, and in any aspects of conflicts, also the conflicts affecting the territories of both Georgia and Moldova, for example, that it can be a challenge to bring the parties formally together, which is why we believe that civil society has such a fundamental role. And I'd like to particularly highlight a program that we designed since the last summit called EU for Dialogue, which really sets out the principles that we think are important. It's a multi-country program. You don't know where you might get forward movement in one of these unresolved conflicts. So potentially the funds are available for action on any of the unresolved conflicts affecting Georgia, Moldova, or over Nagorno-Karabakh. And there's three components, and civil society is a fundamental part of it. That's one of the three components, which we believe is reaching deep into the communities affected by these conflicts. The second one, of course, the strength of the European Union is in its member states. And so we see partnership with member states as an important part of building confidence. And access can indeed be a challenge in certain parts of the conflicts. The UN is one of the few bodies to have access, and we're working with UNDP as well on these issues. Of course, right now in the conflicts between Armenia and Azerbaijan, indeed the only body access is a particularly difficult issue, and the only body that actually has access now is the International Red Cross. So I think what civil society can bring is to show leadership in terms of a willingness between the peoples for example, of Armenia and Azerbaijan, to look beyond and to look towards a prosperous and peaceful and stable Caucasus, which is ultimately in the interest not only of the peoples of Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also of Georgia. And I think for the, there's a lot said about the potential of the Caucasus and the linkage between Asia and Europe. And that's all very much true, but for that you definitely need peaceful and stable Caucasus. And I think it's so important, first and foremost, for the peace and democracy in the Caucasus, but also to ensure the economic prosperity of the region going forwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Looking on Ukraine, and particularly on Donbass, it is here Germany and France. We had a Normandy format, which is the most active part, let's say, of the EU. At the same time, I think there is a criticism from Ukraine not getting a sufficient support also in terms of its security challenges. So, Orisha, where do you see EU's role with regard to the situation in Crimea and Donbass? I think we are really in a very, very tense situation at the moment, not only there, but yeah, so where do you see here the EU's role? What the EU can supply, and what are the expectations from the Ukrainian side?
Thank you very much, Stefan. Great to be with you. It's interesting how at the beginning in your introduction, Stefan, you struggled to characterize these conflicts. Are they frozen, limited intensity? What are they? And we should think of them in terms of peace resolution that is frozen, not the conflicts. And any efforts, we have all these kinds of platforms, groups, they fail to achieve a breakthrough towards peace resolution. And my interpretation of this is because Russia is not interested in achieving any peace resolution of those conflicts. I mean, today we are speaking almost 30 years ago when Belaverskaya Pushcha took place, when the Soviet Union was dissolved. And we remember the dissolution part of the Soviet Union, but we forget that the three parties pledged to establish community of independent states. Why is this relevant? Because I think this is what Russia would like to carry on. They would emphasize much less on the word independent, but they would like to see a reset and restoration of the spheres of influence by absorbing countries, and these conflicts serve as a certain leverage to push countries into the Russian orbit. That's why I think it's important to understand that these conflicts are instrumentalized, and that's why they are so protracted and so difficult to resolve. So countries like Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova are in a security vacuum. And there's a very clear understanding of society, especially in Ukraine. People believe that, they are in a security vacuum, that, for example, the threat of Russian aggression, especially now, but that's even before the buildup, public opinion said that the threat of direct military aggression is about 71%. When people are asked, in case of military aggression, who you can rely on? And this is, where people see EU, NATO. So 56% would say we have to rely on our own resources and our own fighting capabilities. 34% say we need to rely on EU and NATO, and 25% say we could rely on US. So you see where the mood is and where resolve comes from. So you mentioned, Stefan, Normandy format and Minsk agreements. But again, bring us back to history, to Geneva meeting. Geneva meeting took place in October 2014, and it included US, it included EU, Russia, and Ukraine. And there were just 5 points in that Geneva protocol, which number one was disarming illegal groups. And actually, John Kerry called a spade a spade. He said, Russia is responsible for organizing the presence of those illegal groups. Since then, we don't hear these words from senior officials, now perhaps more with the build-up on the ground, but Russia managed to hijack, by deploying a military force in Debaltsevo, this whole process, transformed it into this Normandy format that had a goal of establishing limited sovereignty in Ukraine. And throughout all those almost 7 years, there has been push and pull between Kiev, Paris, Berlin, and Moscow for Ukraine to defend its full sovereignty and for Russia to impose this limited sovereignty. So I think it's important also to stress that conflict in Donbass is not about Donbass. Because people might think, you know, especially audiences in the West, that it's a territory and Russia like to control this territory with Russian-speaking populations. That's not the case. This is all about Kiev. This is about Ukraine, and response, therefore, should be about Ukraine. And here, I think EU should do what it's best and should build on that sentiment that Ukrainians believe that they should rely on their own resolve and their own resources to withstand Russia. And what EU is best is building institutions to strengthen the agency of countries like Ukraine to defend its national interests. And that would require a few things within the context of that conflict. That is, of course, assistance that the EU is already providing, but also more high-level strategic communication about the solidarity that actually Ukraine is at the core interest of European security. Because this is what Putin counts. He counts that business relations with Russia, that strategic stability with Russia is more important for European capitals than Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. And I don't think I have to make here the case why this is not. If there is time, we can. But I think this is very important to say at the very high level. Now, Crimea. How much time I have on Crimea, just to say a few words.
Maybe 1 minute, because we have only a 45-minute session. I want to have a second question,
Absolutely.
then we have more Q&As.
So on Crimea, I think Crimea is a bit different from the conflict in Donbass, the war there. That Crimea was a land grab for strategic dominance in the Black Sea. That is a real security challenge that is very clear. And I think that would require very strong EU-NATO cooperation on the security of the Black Sea. Of course, Kiev has launched the Crimea platform, which is very important because there was no format where high-level talks about Crimea could take place. It irritates Kremlin. It means it's the right thing to do, from the way I read it. And I was pleased to see the high-level EU attendance in Kiev at the Crimea summit. But now it's time to fill it with substance. Of course, Kiev is thinking how this could be done. One way could be establishing Crimea platforms in respective parliaments, including in the European Parliament, kind of a caucus of members of European Parliament who will follow situation in Crimea, and perhaps some countries taking leadership on sanctions implementation, on human rights, on environment. There's an array of issues, and of course continued non-recognition is key. So finally, I'll just say that that's why I focus on this importance of stressing and building the agencies of these countries to resolve this conflict or to persevere, because I don't think they will be resolved anytime soon. And that means building resilience. And there are countries in the European Union, such as Finland, such as Lithuania, that are great examples of how you can rely on your own resources with territorial defense, with actual educational reform, with media literacy, to build what you need, strong societies. This is the best line of defense against the aggression we are talking about.
Thank you, Russia, also for making this point very strong about internal resilience. Yeah, I think that's also very important, and I think it's good that you strengthen this point. I really want to have a quick answer that we can also take questions from the auditorium, asking in the same order all three speakers. So, what do you expect from the Eastern Partnership Summit next week on the unresolved conflicts? Toivo, maybe really a very short and quick answer. We have great questions already here on Slido. Please.
Okay, I will be very brief, and sorry for dropping off. That was my computer ran out of power. Anyway, I would narrow my answer to what I am engaged in, which is the conflicts in the South Caucasus, and there say that of course we are looking forward to the meeting of President Michel with the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan, and we really hope that this will contribute to moving forward the process of finding a sustainable peace in between those countries, because that is what we can hope for at the moment. It's an incremental process, but I hope that the EU can make a positive impact in that regard with this meeting. And of course, looking more broadly, in the South Caucasus, that is where, again, as I said, the EU can add genuine added value. And this Eastern Partnership Summit can also be used for that, for emphasizing that we support greater cooperation and integration between the three South Caucasus countries.
Thank you. Lawrence, so what do you expect on this from the summit with regard to the conflicts, the unresolved conflicts?
I expect there to be a strong message coming out of the summit from the European Union and Eastern Partnership alike, that the EU needs to and will step up its engagement to address these unresolved conflicts.
Okay, great. Also for being short. Orisia?
Well, I think it's a good moment for the European Union and especially Association Trio to emphasize, as I said, the kind of a paradigm shift where, you know, it was previously a shared neighborhood, the way EU wanted to position this neighborhood, but it's clearly not the neighborhood that Russia wants to share. And I hope we have achieved that level of understanding by now, which means that EU has to be much more firm in terms of affirming its commitment to security, commitment to resilience, and also commitment to countermeasures, because resilience is important, but it's not sufficient. We have to, as I said, call a spade, where Russia is an aggressor state. It doesn't help to pretend that it's a mediator. We've given Russia 7 years in Donbass for a ramp off that Russia did not use. So I think that means that we would like to see, especially from the summit, emphasis on energy security and Nord Stream 2. That is still an open issue, and that unwavering compliance with the EU third energy package with no exceptions to the Gazprom, and due diligence of whatever companies they will set up to pretend that it's independent. And I think that it's very important for EU to emphasize human security, because countries that are living along the conflict lines in all these countries, they are suffering, and that suffering is economic, that suffering is psychological, and I think much more investment is needed to sustain these communities. Look at Azov Sea, how it's paying a high price with fishing, with ports trade declining, all the obstruction that Russia is creating. So I think showing solidarity and demonstrating that EU stands by these communities who pay a very high price would be very important. And finally, I think this commitment to anti-corruption is important, because the illicit flows that are going from countries in our region and finding safe havens in Austria, in other countries, in Switzerland. UK is out of EU, but I think there could be a good cooperation on that to undermine kleptocracies that will eventually lead to more democracy in our region and less conflict.
Thank you. Quite a lot of expectations. So let's start maybe with Toivo here. Really some good questions in the chat. I just read out 3 questions for you. The first is from Ian Bond. It has just been announced that Russia will host a meeting of the 3 Caucasus states, Turkey and Iran, tomorrow in order to seek in conflict. That would be the first question. I have questions. Second question is from Christina.
Stefan, I can't understand what you're saying.
I think
There is a problem with your signal. Let me step in, if I may, and I will read out those two questions to Mr. Klar from the Slido. So the question on Russia hosting a meeting of three Caucasus states, Turkey and Iran, tomorrow in order to seek lasting stability in the South Caucasus. The question is, the EU and the Minsk group co-chairs are excluded from this format entirely. Isn't the EU at the serious risk of being marginalized? And let's take this question first, and let's see if Stefan can come back.
Well, first of all, this is a meeting of deputy foreign ministers in Moscow, indeed. But it is not the three South Caucasus countries. It is the Turkey, Russia, Iran, and Azerbaijan and Armenia. Georgia is not participating. So this illustrates the fact that because of the unresolved conflict between Russia and Georgia, there are limits to what Russia can do in this context. I mean, for Georgia, this has been stressed over and over again. On the contrary, for the EU, all three South Caucasus countries are partners in our Eastern Partnership, and we see great opportunities for the EU specifically to provide a serious push towards greater regional cooperation, precisely because of this fact. So in a way, the Russian efforts to help bring about peace in between Armenia and Azerbaijan are welcome. Russia has done a great deal. Russia brought about the ceasefire. Russia has helped to mediate the return of prisoners of war, and Russia is making efforts to help bring about the start of negotiations on border delimitation. So there's a great deal that Russia is doing there, and where I don't necessarily see that there is a contradiction between our efforts and Russian efforts. In fact, we are talking quite often with the Russians about what they are doing and what we are doing. What, of course, we don't believe is anything that we could or would want to support is any kind of exclusive relationships. And so if this 3+2 meeting brings about some useful ideas, that's all for the good. But of course, the EU wants to be engaged in the South Caucasus and will continue to be engaged in the South Caucasus.
A follow-up question from Stanislav Sekriru from the EU ISS Institute in Paris to you, Mr. Klar, but I think it can be also addressed to Lawrence Benedict. To which extent the EU is involved in the process of reopening transportation routes between Armenia and Azerbaijan? And does the EU see for itself a role to support process of demarcation and delimitation of border between both countries?
Well, I think yes. Well, on the first question, indeed, we are offering our expertise, our know-how, and again in the broader South Caucasus context, I think there is great work to be done. The Russians, there is this format of the three deputy prime ministers of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia meeting to discuss regional interconnections, and again, there is not necessarily a contradiction between what we can do and what Russia can help to do in this context. The main thing is that we have our clearly defined interests as far as our 10T networks are concerned, that we want to promote, and we have our programs with both Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia, where we can build on those and help build regional interconnections. And so there's a great deal of scope that actually for complementarity, if there is a will for that. I think from the EU side, there is a will for that. Not sure. It's important that we have that from all sides. Sorry, what was your second point?
The EU's role in demarcation.
Well, in demarcation, well, again, there we have offered. We have offered to the countries our readiness to support this process in as great a scope as, again, the two countries want to have. And from providing technical expertise to broader engagement. So, but it is a difficult process. I mean, first of all, what we must recognize is that it's not just about the EU doing something, or even the Russians doing something. It is about the Armenia and Azerbaijan reaching the kind of agreements that open up space for constructive negotiations. And of course, so for that also tensions have to be lowered along the mutual border. There has to be good faith negotiations, but for these good faith negotiations, you also need to have the kind of environment that is conducive for that. And that means lowering of tensions.
Do you want to elaborate on both questions, Lorenz?
Thank you very much. Important questions. I'd particularly like to comment on the connectivity angle because, as Toivo said, this is a crucial issue. And I think we need to, I would make two comments. Firstly, it's clear that for there to be peace and stability in the Caucasus, we need a vision of a future Caucasus, and connectivity is central to that. Of course, in the current situation, take Armenia, for example, where borders are closed both with Turkey and Azerbaijan. I mean, that obviously hugely complicates what might be the, let's say, the most logical connectivity routes across between the Caspian and the Black Sea. And I think as we help to envision a sustainable peace, I think connectivity can be really key to unlocking some of these issues. And so definitely the European Union is keen to support that. And the second point I want to make is that's very timely because Commissioner Vahe is putting forward a very ambitious economic and investment plan where connectivity, and in particular Black Sea connectivity, is at the heart of this. So we believe we have the instruments to strongly support moves towards a sustainable peace process, and that investing in connectivity can be to the benefit of all the peoples of the Caucasus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, but also Georgia. Thank you.
Very good. Orissia, there are several questions also to you. We have only a few minutes left, so I will read them out to you, but please be brief in answering. One of them is about the big picture. It's about hybrid warfare against both Eastern Partnership countries on the one hand and to the EU. What can be improved in that way? And there's a question from Mantas Ikamivicius from Lithuania. The Eastern Partnership was not designed to solve these conflicts, yet Russia keeps instigating them in order to undermine the right of Eastern Partnership countries to make their sovereign decisions. Empowering this right and increasing CFSP cooperation with the Eastern Partnership is what the EU must do. Can it do so? And there is a question also about the potential cooperation with NATO in the Eastern neighborhood from Vera Raciborinska.
Thank you, Milan. I'll be brief. On the big picture, you know, people use the hybrid warfare, and the European Union is developing this vocabulary and the methodology of hybrid threats. I see this as the full spectrum warfare that includes, in case of Ukraine, from military to disinformation to energy, you know, weaponization, even history. with that infamous Putin's essay that denies Ukraine, for example, a historic right. So not only Putin has stolen Ukrainian past, but now he's trying to steal Ukrainian future. And that's why I think that resilience and countermeasures to this to these hybrid threats are so important. And I brought in Lithuania and Finland not by pure chance, because I think these countries have a certain excellence in building strong societies where we could have much more cooperation. And it's important to remember that resilience is created at the local level. And this is where I think EU could boost up its programming, where you have non-state actors, municipalities, especially in Ukraine, where you have decentralization, twinning with European municipalities for better services, citizen engagement. And I think people are looking for solutions, in environment, in urban planning, deliberative governments. It may all seem like, a bit distance from security, but honestly, when the rubber hits the road, people who have something to lose at stake in their communities will defend their communities. And this networking that will emerge as part of developmental projects at times of crisis, which we all live in, are so crucial to sustain societies and continue resistance. So on security cooperation, I think yes. What Russia expects is for the West to remain confused about its role in the conflict, about its real goals. That's why there are a lot of smoke screens. That's why intelligence sharing and perhaps a better integration of countries like Ukraine into the hybrid threat cell tabletop exercise is very important, because as I'm not talking about community level by pure chance. This is where trouble starts. And this is where we should have a real-time intelligence and engagement and cooperation between EU and these countries. And this horizontal cooperation is not at sufficient level. And finally, NATO. I mean, we all following after 2 days ago the online summit, and today the FT had an article saying that there will be consultation with some NATO member states about accommodating to some of Putin's demands on NATO enlargement. I personally think this is a very dangerous and slippery slope, and that both NATO and US and EU have to stand firm that alliance collective security is beyond Russia's control, and it will not be decided by Russia where this alliance stops. And I think in case of Ukraine, there has to be a much stronger work towards interoperability and coalition of the willing of NATO member states, maybe not all, but countries like UK, US, Canada, Poland, Lithuania, that would help build Ukraine deterrence fund, that would, in case of aggression, become operational for Ukraine to defend itself, and also their opportunities as parts of enhanced opportunity partnership. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a few minutes left only. And Lawrence, there is one question for you. At the moment, the EU's dialogue program works for Moldova and South Caucasus. Does DGNR plan to launch similar program also for Ukraine? And also, please, if you can comment very briefly the security dimension of this partnership in the context of what's going on around Ukraine.
Well, thank you very much. In fact, in a way, the origin of the EU for Dialogue program was that at the time, and the first design of this was already taking place around 2016, 2017, there was so much attention on Ukraine for very understandable reasons, and so many instruments rightly focused on addressing the conflicts both over Crimea and eastern Ukraine, Donbass area, that we thought it was important to have an instrument also to support the conflicts, which at that point had been relatively forgotten in our view, and therefore we designed this 15 million euro program with flexibility, as I outlined earlier, and with these three components. So firstly, that we can work on the socioeconomic situation through our UN partners. Secondly, we can address education and culture. in partnership with our member states, which I think is one of the strengths of the European Union. And thirdly, and we discussed this earlier, that the central role that civil society can play in confidence building, conflict mediation and resolution is a key component as well. So that's the focus of the EU for dialogue, and that's why it addresses these conflicts that I outlined earlier on the territories of Georgia, Moldova, but also covering conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. As regards the broader security situation, that's clearly going to be a key theme for the Eastern Partnership Summit next week. And I'm sure it's going to solicit a very lively debate, but it is central because for the EU to be a geopolitical commission and to step up its engagement in addressing all these unresolved conflicts, clearly an enhanced role and a deeper understanding of the security situation is fundamental.
Thank you to all of you. There are more questions in the Slido that I could read. Several of them to you, Toivo Klar. I hope you can read them. But now it's time for me to say really many thanks to all of you, to our speakers, Orisia Lucevic, Lorenz Meredith, and Toivo Klar for sharing your insights with us. Sincere thank you to all our participants who followed us, many of you from the morning, from 9 o'clock. Thank you for staying until this moment. And also on behalf of my colleague Stefan Meister, thanks to all colleagues from the Think Tank Network that helped us during the year to sustain work within this, what we hope will develop into a think tank forum on Eastern Partnership in the upcoming period. Stefan had a very unusual activity on his internet connections and his laptop since the morning. I hope this is not also new normal, what we are experiencing. But as next week will be very important day for Eastern Partnership, the summit on the 15th of December. By the way, here in Berlin, where the new government and Chancellor Olaf Scholz took office yesterday, it is also seen as the first EU format for Chancellor Olaf Scholz that he will experience in Brussels. So we very much hope to have a support from the incoming government, as this whole initiative was started under the German EU presidency in 2020. And we are looking forward to work with the incoming French presidency and Czech presidency on think tanks in the Eastern Partnership. Once again, from my side, thanks to you all. Have a good day and looking forward to the Eastern Partnership Summit.
Thank you for having us.
Many thanks. Fascinating, the exchange.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.